He stood outside the building for 10 minutes before he could make himself walk in. Inside, 3 people sat behind a long table, and in less than 2 minutes, they told him his idea wasn't good enough. Not yet. Not almost. Just not good enough. He walked out, sat in his car, and didn't turn the key for almost 20 minutes. He just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, wondering if maybe they were right. This is a story about what happened after that moment. Because what he did next is the only reason you'd ever hear about him at all. 3 years earlier, he'd left a stable job to build something of his own. Everyone around him thought he was making a mistake. His savings were thin. His confidence was thinner some days, though he never let anyone see that. He believed in the idea, a small service business solving a problem he'd struggled with himself for years. He built the first version alone, nights and weekends, in a spare room that barely fit a desk. For 2 years, it grew slowly. Not fast enough to feel safe. Not slow enough to quit. Just slow enough to keep him constantly unsure if he was building something, or wasting years of his life on nothing. That meeting was supposed to change everything. A chance to pitch his business to investors who could fund the next stage of growth. He'd prepared for weeks, rehearsed the pitch until he could say it in his sleep. And in less than 2 minutes, it was over. One investor barely looked up from his phone. Another interrupted halfway through to ask a question that made it clear he hadn't been listening. The third just said, flatly, "I don't think this solves a real problem." He left with no notes, no feedback, nothing to work with, just a closed door and the sinking feeling that maybe the last 3 years had been a mistake. That night, he almost sent an email. He drafted it in his head a dozen times over the drive home, a message to a former employer, asking if there was any chance of coming back. He sat with the laptop open for almost an hour. His hands were on the keys. And in that hour, something in him kept circling back to one question. If he sent this email, was it because the business had actually failed, or because 3 people in one room had failed to see it? He didn't have a clear answer that night. He just knew that sending the email felt like admitting the second one was true. And some part of him wasn't ready to believe that yet. He closed the laptop without sending it. The next morning, he didn't feel motivated. He didn't wake up inspired. He woke up tired, discouraged, and still unsure if he was making the right call. But he did one thing. He opened his laptop and made a list of every question the investors had asked, even the dismissive one. Not to defend himself, to actually look at what was underneath it. And buried in that harsh, rushed feedback, there was one real point. His pitch explained the product well, but never clearly explained who it was for. He'd been so focused on what he built that he'd never sharpened who needed it most. That single insight, buried inside a rejection that felt like a dead end, became the thing he spent the next 2 months fixing. He didn't get a second meeting with those same investors. He didn't need one. He rebuilt his pitch around a much narrower, clearer audience. One specific type of customer he could describe in a single sentence. He rewrote his website. He changed how he talked about the business to everyone, not just investors. Within 2 months, something shifted. Not dramatically, no viral moment, no lucky break. Just a steady, noticeable uptick. The right customers started finding the business faster. A local partnership fell into place because the pitch, this time, was instantly clear. Referrals started coming in on their own. It wasn't overnight, but it was undeniable. The business that wasn't a real problem was quietly becoming exactly that. A business solving a real, specific problem for real, specific people. A year later, he ran into one of those same investors at an industry event. The investor didn't remember the meeting at all. Didn't remember the pitch, the dismissive comment, any of it. For that investor, it had been one meeting out of hundreds. For him, it had been the night he almost gave up on 3 years of work. That's the part that stuck with him most. The rejection that felt like the end of his story wasn't even a memory to the person who delivered it. It only carried the weight he chose to give it. Here's what this story is really about. The rejection wasn't the problem. The problem would have been believing it was the final word. Somewhere in almost every hard no is a piece of real information, buried under the sting, easy to miss if you only feel the rejection and never look underneath it. The people who come back from a rejection aren't the ones who never feel its weight. They're the ones who eventually ask, what is this actually telling me? Instead of just, why did this happen to me? If you're sitting with a rejection right now, a no that felt like it closed a door for good, ask yourself what might actually be underneath it. not to excuse how much it hurts, just to see if there's something in there worth using. If this story reminded you why you can't stop yet, subscribe, because your version of that meeting might be coming. And when it does, I want you to remember, it's one moment. It's not your whole story. Keep going.